Hello. The focus of this video is the filibuster, which is a rule in the Senate that allows a senator to literally talk a bill to death. It is a procedural tool that is used by the minority party when they object to a bill in that chamber. Filibusters only exist in the Senate. They do not exist in the House of Representatives, but they do exist in the Senate. Now, the Senate operates, as you're reading in Chapter 9, the rules of the Senate are different than the rules of the House. For example, in the House of Representatives, the majority party tightly controls how things occur, and there are strict rules for debate and for who can speak on a bill and that sort of thing. But keep in mind, the House of Representatives is made up of 435 members, so they really do need tight rules to be able to do anything. If they allowed every representative to speak on every bill, they would never accomplish anything. But the Senate is less than 1/4 the size of the House. Remember, there are 2 senators per state, so there are a total currently of 100 senators. So the Senate has always operated a little differently. The rules are looser. For example, an individual senator who doesn't want to discuss a bill at all can withhold their consent, and that kind of slows the process of moving a bill up for consideration. There are a number of other tools that the minority party is able to use to stop bills from being considered, but the most famous is the filibuster. Now, filibusters have been around in the Senate for multiple decades, going back to the 1800s. And essentially, a real filibuster, what some people call a talking filibuster, is when a senator rises to speak on a bill and they're recognized, and then they speak and they speak and they speak. And they don't have to talk just about the bill, they could talk about whatever they want. There's no rule in the Senate that they have to talk about the subject of what's being discussed. And so senators in the past have been known to read from the newspaper or from a book, or from any other any other thing they have in order to simply hold the floor. Now, the talking filibuster has not really been used much in recent years because over time the Senate has kind of adopted a way of having filibusters without actually having them, meaning. So as you'll read in Chapter 9, it takes a vote of 3/5 of the Senate, which is out of 100 senators, that means 60, to invoke what's called cloture. Cloture is a procedure to put a time limit on the debate, and that means that the filibuster is no longer possible. But again, they do need the vote of 3/5 or 60 senators in order to invoke cloture and put a time limit. So if you have less than 3/5, they're not going to be able to stop the filibuster. So what's happened in recent years is that anytime the minority party threatens a bill with filibuster, the majority party just withdraws the bill and they don't move forward on it. They don't actually require that the real filibuster take place where they actually talk it to death. So there haven't really been real talking filibusters for quite a few years. And that's because the 2 parties have come to an agreement that if one side threatens a filibuster and the majority party does not have enough votes to invoke cloture, then they simply will not consider that bill. Now, one of the problems about that is that if you're the majority party, it makes it really hard to get your bills through unless you can get support from the minority party. Now, that's kind of the idea, is that you have some bipartisan support. But on a lot of bills, it really does take not just the members of the majority party, but also a substantial number of the minority party in order to pass the bill. And some people say that that's not really the way it should work, because a bill could have the support of a majority of senators, but not have enough to get past the filibuster. So there have been suggestions about how to change that, maybe either to reform the filibuster or abolish it. Now, a few years ago, it started with when Democrats were in the majority back in 2013. They eliminated filibusters for presidential appointments. Presidents make appointments of people to serve in their cabinet and to head executive agencies. And the Democrats at the time said that they were frustrated that Republicans were blocking approval of President Obama's appointments. So they said that no longer would filibusters be allowed on presidential appointments. Now that works both ways. When the Republicans were in the majority after Donald Trump took office, they were able to push through his appointments without the Democrats being able to stop that. So that was, and they also eliminated at the time eliminated filibusters on judicial appointments below the Supreme Court level. And then in 2017, right after Donald Trump took office, the Republicans had the Senate majority, and Donald Trump appointed someone to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Democrats planned to filibuster that nomination, so the Republican majority in the Senate said, we're going to take away the ability of the minority party to filibuster Supreme Court appointments. So today, there's no way for the minority party to stop a presidential appointment through a filibuster. There might be other ways for them to stop it. They could vote against it and so forth, but they cannot do it through a filibuster. There's some discussion in the book about what's called the nuclear option, which is the idea of getting rid of filibusters altogether. At the moment, as of 2021, filibusters still do exist as a tool for the minority party on legislation. They cannot use it anymore on presidential appointments. They can't use it, for example, when the president appoints somebody to the Supreme Court, but they still can use it on legislation. But again, as I said, it's not a talking filibuster. They don't actually have to stand and talk for hours on end. All they have to do is threaten the filibuster, and unless the Democrats can convince enough Republicans, with the Democrats in the majority, unless they can convince enough Republicans to stop the filibuster or the threat of it, it's going to be enough. So there has been discussion about either reforming the filibuster or eliminating it altogether. Again, the whole idea behind the filibuster was that it would slow things down in the Senate, but not completely stop things. But it has really meant that if it's a really controversial bill or a bill that is substantive that, say, a president wants, there's just simply no way to get it passed unless there's a number of people in the minority party who go along with it. And so one idea to reform the process would be to require that if the minority party wants to filibuster, they actually have to talk. That they have to actually take to the floor and talk for hours on end and sacrifice time and all of the things that are involved with a real filibuster, rather than just, because again, right now just the threat of a filibuster is enough. But some people say, well, let's make the process painful. If they're going to threaten a filibuster, they should actually have to engage in it and actually have to stand there on the floor of the Senate for hours or whatever and talk about the bill or whatever. That's one idea, and there's a thinking that might reduce the number of threatened filibusters. Another idea is to simply get rid of the filibuster altogether, and that the majority party does have some ways to get rid of the filibuster. And if they got rid of it, it would mean that every vote in the Senate would have a time limit, which is again not the case right now. But it would say that every vote on every bill would be time limited, so there would be no possibility of the minority party even threatening a filibuster. And of course, it would mean that the majority would decide what happens. Now, that's the way it works in the House, because the House of Representatives doesn't have a filibuster. So if the majority party wants to do something, they simply they put it on the floor for a debate, and they have a time limit. And at the end of the debate, they vote, and it's almost always the case that the majority party wins. And so a lot of people say that's the way it should be in the Senate. That minority parties over time have abused the filibuster, and people put blame on both parties. It did rise significantly when Republicans were in the minority under President Obama, but certainly Democrats also threatened filibusters during the Trump administration. So now, again, with the Biden administration and the efforts to pass different important pieces of legislation, there's been some discussion that the Democrats will try to eliminate the filibuster. At the moment, they don't have the votes to do that. They haven't convinced all of their members to do that, but that could change at some point. One other thing I should mention is that it is possible to pass legislation without threats of a filibuster in certain circumstances, and that is, as discussed in Chapter 9, the process of reconciliation. Reconciliation was established as a way to pass budgetary matters, because there was a fear that the minority party would stop even approval of the federal budget, which is an important requirement of Congress every year, and that the government would have to shut down if the Senate could not agree on a budget. So they developed a process called reconciliation, where if a bill has budgetary implications, then they could pass it under the reconciliation process, which does not allow for filibusters or threats of filibusters. That is the way in which the American Rescue Plan, which was President Biden's plan to deal with COVID and stimulate the economy. That's how it was passed in the Senate, because it did not have any Republican support. So the Democratic majority used the reconciliation process to pass it. And there was no possibility of a Republican filibuster. However, that reconciliation tool cannot be used on every bill, and it can only be used a few times a year. So it's a partial solution for some people to what they see as the problem of filibusters, but it's not. The minority party can filibuster almost every other type of bill that comes up. So again, filibusters certainly had a purpose in the past, the idea of helping the Senate slow things down and consider the views of the minority party. But many people believe that the filibuster has gotten out of control, and it basically paralyzes the Senate and doesn't make it even possible to pass important legislation that a majority party would like to pass. And again, there are views on both sides of that. There are also some who believe the filibuster is not even constitutional, but the Constitution leaves it up to the Senate to pass its own rules. So it's probably constitutional to have a filibuster, but it certainly may not be the best process that's available. So make sure you read Chapter 9 in the information on the filibuster. It's again something that a lot of people are not always familiar with. If you have any questions, please ask, and have a great week. Thank you.